You may remember our guest here from Page 2, ESPN's Page 2 with Bill Simmons, now has his own podcast.
Yeah.
And he joins us now. What's up, man?
I texted you. I wanted to talk about Ben Simmons because I'm doing football the next couple of pods on my pod, and I just have like a 20-minute Ben Simmons conversation to me that might, expire over I don't know what the time sensitivity is on it. Who knows if something will happen over the weekend, but I'm just so fascinated by this story, and I don't even remember if it has a parallel in recent NBA history.
Again, that's where you always, I think, kind of lap the rest of us, the historical perspective of like, hey, this is happening. It's newsy. We've got all these tidbits and rumors that we're going to get to and who's in charge of this deal. But historically, what we're talking about with somebody this young, this many years left on the deal, and basically saying, hey, you guys think I suck anyway, so what's the point? And then the threatening holdout thing, which I'd heard about a month ago, and I think it was met with kind of indifference, like, all right, go ahead, hold out, man. But we don't know. So why don't you take it in any direction you think the headline part of this story is right now?
The headline part of the story is I think both sides have a right to just want to move on from this, right? And I think everybody else, unfortunately, knows that for the two sides. But this starts when they try to trade him for Harden. And you can make Simmons the bad guy. You can make Clutch the bad guy. There's all kinds of takes you can do with this. But it starts when they try to trade him for Harden. And when you try to trade somebody, you go down the road, you actually think you got him, which I think both of us had intel that day that Harden was going to Philly. It was a wrap. And Simmons knows all this. So it starts there. Then you have, this is kind of Embiid's team. It's Embiid's city. He's always resonated in that city more than Simmons has. So you have that piece too. Whether those guys get along or not, I don't even think that really matters for this. Then you have the playoffs. Really a historic no-show from him, who's supposedly a top 15, 20 guy, right? I went into the last season thinking he was one of the best 16, 17 guys in the league and an elite athlete, an elite defensive player, somebody who made everybody better. He took such a step back in the playoffs. They were like crazy stats. Like he had the lowest free throw percentage in the history of playoff basketball for anyone who took more than 70 free throws in the playoffs ever. This includes everyone dating back to like 1946. So you have that. You have the famous stat about he only took 3 field goals in 7 games against the Hawks in the fourth quarter. And then you have the eye test, which is like, this is a guy who just looks scared, who looks like he's afraid to fail. And I think when you have the afraid to fail as a phrase, which we've discussed on my podcast multiple times here, other teams see that and they're like, all right, so here's this guy who's basically a max player, who has 4 years left on his deal, who has Clutch, who, is the toughest agency of all these agencies to deal with, who's going to expect to be the guy when it comes to our team, but also hasn't shown that he's gotten any better in the last 4 years, or that he could be the best guy on a championship team, or that he's not going to be completely terrified in the last 6 minutes of a game 7. And I'm supposed to give up something for this? And then you have on the flip side, you have Philly, who's like, clearly he can't come back. So when I bring back the history of this stuff, I don't remember a situation where neither side had outs. We've seen guys get unhappy. We saw like Jason Kidd in Dallas in 96, where it was like, he probably needs to go. They found a team. It was a lot easier back then. It's easier to make deals with caps. Nowadays, with the amount of money he makes, with what you'd have to give back, and then how teams probably feel about how iffy he is as a number one guy, it doesn't seem like they have a market for this guy. So now he says, I'm going to hold out. All right, I guess you are. I guess you're going to hold out. On top of it, this is happening in Philly, the craziest city this could happen in, where if they're out on you in Philly, they're out. They're out in the meanest, worst way possible. I respect it. So you have all these things leading toward training camp, which suddenly is 3 weeks away? And I don't know how this plays out. And I don't think they have a trade. And I think he's going to hold out. And I think this really has a chance to be one of the ugliest kind of player moments with the team that we've had in the history of the league. So that's why I wanted to come on and talk about it for 20 minutes.
Perfect summary. Perfect summary. So let me add my personal element to this. As I see this story play out, I'm pissed off at literally everyone involved.
Yeah, okay? There's no winners.
I don't want to root for anyone. It's like if I knew more about FIFA government, it'd be like, hey, who are your favorite officials at the top of FIFA? And let's pick whose side you want to. I don't want to argue any one side because it starts with Ben Simmons. if I have to see one more video of him taking jumpers in the off season in some pickup game at LA Fitness, no one cares, man. No one cares. It doesn't mean you have to have that, but stop. And when I went back to the pod that I had with guys who I asked, Jaylen Brown and Ben Simmons, and I should have done more of them, I didn't, but I did this whole thing breakdown from front office guys being like, hey, who would you take? And it was shockingly pro Jaylen Brown. And there was one guy in particular was just like, hey, all this stuff, shooting coach and all these hours, is it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. The other part of it was that Embiid and Simmons are actually tight. And I know Embiid is like, hey, that's my guy. And it's no one believes that. No one's ever believed it. Anyone that's ever had any information, whether you're a beat guy or somebody like us who talks to enough people, and they don't have to be in love with each other. They don't have to be best friends, but we always knew that relationship, because of whose team it was and all that kind of stuff, it was always going to be a little strained, which is not specific to them.
And it was the two sons in the city, basically, where it's the city's going to like one guy more than the other guy. It's just the way it goes. The same thing happened with Durant and Curry in Golden State. It's no matter how good Durant was, it was Curry's city, and that's just the way it is. And sometimes when you realize that when you're the other guy, you become the middle brother versus the older brother.
And we had, the years of the hinky sycophants telling us they could play together. It was a perfect fit, that all of us that thought from a basketball standpoint it was a strained fit, that we were idiots. It's no, we weren't. And it doesn't mean it was incapable of them necessarily being a better team, but there's just too many damn possessions throughout the playoffs. When I did that whole breakdown and closing out those Atlanta games, you're like, Ben brings it up. They set a screen. Ben's defender never leaves the elbow. Embiid swallowed. It's a two-man game with Curry and Embiid. Simmons watches and now doesn't even want to shoot. That's a real thing. So don't tell me.
He was PJ Tucker. If PJ Tucker brought the ball up for the Bucks and then just ran over to the side and say, all right, I'm out.
If he attempted layups.
Right.
Attempted layups.
Yeah.
And then, look, I get what Daryl's job is, but nothing annoys me more than when Daryl will tweet out some stat that shows that Ben Simmons is the 8th best player in the NBA, or when KOC for Ringer did that incredible breakdown, kind of arguing how much more valuable Simmons was during the regular season and his passes inside the shooting pocket. And then Daryl retweets it and is on it. So I personally have been offended by almost every element of the story.
Well, and we didn't mention Clutch yet either. And Clutch,
and that's where I was going.
They think they have everybody in the NBA just in fear of them at all times. And they just feel like they can strong arm this situation and get him somewhere else. The problem is nobody wants to give up 100 cents on the dollar, 90 cents on the dollar, 80 cents on the dollar for Ben Simmons. I would even say 70 cents on the dollar. I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's if you're Sacramento, and Daryl, this gets so ugly 3 weeks from now. And Daryl's I just got to trade this guy. This could actually ruin the season. He's going to hold out. We're getting nothing for him. I have no more outs. Clutch basically pulls it off, gun to the head. You're actually going to trade him. And Daryl caves. I feel the best trade that they could get would be Halliburton and Buddy Hield. And that's it. And I don't even know if Sacramento would want to give up Halliburton. But you can make a case they would, because they know they have Mitchell. Mitchell, not it was a surprise to us, but he looked great in Summer League. So they know they could replace Halliburton's minutes, and they could gamble on Simmons, who we all thought was a top 15 talent a year ago. I feel that's the best trade out there. I don't think they're getting Zach LaVine for him. I used to think that a couple months ago. This is too ugly now. They're not getting Zach LaVine for him. They're not getting anybody who's in the top 30 for him. So that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, is Sacramento willing to trade Tyrese Halliburton or not? Otherwise, where does he go? I have no idea. Golden State's not trading for him.
Well, the Clutch part of it is important to bring up because it's probably the desensitizing to what new NBA realities are. When a guy had a year left on a deal and we're like, oh, this guy's just going to tank or he's not going to resign. So now he's demanding a trade. Whether it was LeBron leaving as a free agent a decade ago, which was actually a lot better than Melo, or was it worse than what Melo did to Denver? Because everybody was at that Nuggets team was like, this sucks. The guy's showing up to work every day and we get to talk about it for a month straight.
And they were good.
And they were good. And he's he wants out of here, but he doesn't care that he's going to the Knicks and stripping them. But is he actually doing us a favor because he's telling us he's going to leave? And now when anybody does that, nobody cares. It's a bit like college football players transferring where it's oh, that's ridiculous. Just suck it up. Suck it. Now
they defend the players. Oh, it's their right. It's their right to sabotage their own team for a year.
I'm fine with the guys. Or you're talking on the NBA thing. Everybody defends them now. So is the new normal whether it was Anthony Davis with a year plus going, I'm out of here, where you got to go nuclear option, and that's where Clutch steps in. And honestly, other agents have done this too, so it isn't just specific to them.
David Falk way back when. David Falk invented it, and that was in the mid-'90s, so Clutch wasn't the first.
For whenever there's like the persecution complex from the Clutch part of it, I'll just be like, look, no one's like Scott Boras for 20 years, okay?
Yeah.
No, so whoever is considered to be the most powerful, that just goes with the territory. It's like being a high school principal. You're not going to be loved in this role, especially if your role is to push your weight around and force a situation that isn't advantageous to the franchise or the fan base in Philadelphia, because the new normal may very well be, hey, I'm doing the 4-year extension and I don't give a shit. I'm not going to wait until a year out. I'm going to demand a trade with 4 years left on a contract, which likely is the new normal of the NBA, even if it pisses everybody off because this is new stuff here.
Well, with Simmons, on the one hand, I get it because they try to trade him. And I think once you get traded, we've seen this happen with Boston teams, like some of my favorite teams where the guys have been in trade rumors or they knew they were almost on their way out. And it really affected, I think, the makeup of the team in a lot of ways. So I get it. It's like, well, fuck you guys. You try to trade me for James Harden. On the other hand, he hasn't gotten better. Like the free throw thing is indefensible. It just is. He's making $30 million a year. He's supposedly one of the top 20 guys in the league, and he makes 1 out of every 3 free throws in the playoffs with a big sample size, not like one series. This is like, he's bad at this, and we've never seen like a non-center be that bad at it. How scared he is at the end of these games is a real thing. And I was talking to somebody from one team about it, about like, what would be your biggest hesitation trading for Simmons? It was the same hesitation I have and the same hesitation you have. Do you want somebody as one of your best guys who seems like he's afraid of big moments? And everything we've seen from Simmons is like, this guy actually seems like he's kind of afraid in big moments. And it's like, yeah, you can put people around him. You can put shooters around him. You can make him the focal point, this point forward, and you could ride his defense and how incredible he is on that end. But if he's kind of scared to be there in big moments, what am I getting and can I win the title? I just feel like I don't trust him in a game 7. I'd want to see it first, which I think is where all these teams are. It's like, show us the upside of what we're trading for. I'm not trading for the pipe dream that he's going to figure it out, because at this point it's like quarterbacks, right? We always talk about, at some point you kind of know with quarterbacks, like you and I both know Daniel Jones sucks. He's not going to be good. In 2 years with quarterbacks, he just sucks. He's not going to be good.
So you like my Daniel Jones, Killian Hayes comp?
Well, Killian Hayes, if he doesn't look good this year, I'm out.
Yeah, right. It's too early to do the Killian Hayes thing.
Yeah, and on the flip side, my hero, Mac Jones, like at some point, if you're good, you're going to show it pretty early. There's going to be signs and seeds. And I think with Simmons, there were signs and seeds, which is why people don't want to give up. He's a devastating defensive player. He's awesome. But if I'm trading for him, if I'm Sacramento, I'm putting real thought on this. Like, what am I ultimately trying to do? Am I trying to win a title? And can this guy be out there when it really matters? And you and I don't know the answer.
Yeah, so let's dig in more on the trades, because I was sending some stuff back and forth to you. I saw a Minnesota thing that was like,
yeah, what is that? Who are they giving up?
No Towns, no Edwards. Be hesitant to include D'Angelo Russell.
And they can't trade their pick because they just lost their pick, so they can't trade this year's pick. So what are they trading?
I'm like, in what world would a team, like if I was Daryl, I'd be like, I'd rather you send me nothing than D'Angelo Russell. So like, no, we're not doing that. Sacramento, like we can understand the posturing where it's like, okay, we're going to start with this. You don't get Fox, you don't get Halliburton, you also don't get Davion Mitchell. It's like, okay, we're not getting anybody. We're not getting anybody. Like
here's Harrison Barnes.
We're getting Barnes on expiring and healed. And you could even argue like, all right, does it actually help your depth? And now you're putting more shooting around and less dominant ball handling, because there's a version of it's kind of like the McCollum argument. Doesn't McCollum make the Sixers better with his fit? Yes, but asset-wise, Daryl's not looking at McCollum as equal value, even in a depressed Ben Simmons market. But
also if you're Portland and you make that move, right? You trade McCollum and you trade, who's the guy they just got? Larry Nance Jr. And they're like, let's call it in 2 for 1.
Covington.
Yeah, maybe. One of those two.
Right.
McCollum and one of those two for Simmons. It's a 2 for 1. And then Simmons has the deer in the headlights again in the Portland series, and Portland loses. What happens next? What does Dame Lillard do?
He's out. He's like, I'm out of here.
He's like, I'm out. This guy's a loser. I'm done. So you can't even risk the Ben Simmons trade if you're Portland, because if it doesn't work, you lose that and you lose Dame Lillard. And that's the thing. The other piece I should have mentioned in my almost perfect summary at the top. If you're Philly, you need to get people back that can help you win the title. You're not looking for picks. You're not looking for Killian Hayes. You're not looking for like asset. You're not looking for Kuminga. You need guys. You have this guy who Embiid, when he's healthy in a playoff series, is one of like the 6 or 7 best people to have in a playoff series. And you have shooters around him, and you have one of the most expensive coaches in the league, and you have a pretty deep bench. You can't give away Simmons just for a bunch of stuff that can't help you this year, which is why this is so hard. And that's why I just look at Halliburton and Hield as the only one that, and I don't even know if that makes sense, but that's the only one I could come up with. It's not like Orlando is going to have something that helps Philly this year. Boston's not trading Jalen. Going down the line, Porzingis makes no sense. Like, go through every team. Everybody's like, oh, it'll be easy for them to trade him. Go through the teams. Tell us to trade. It doesn't exist.
I'm not going to agree with you on doesn't exist. I'm going to say it's really challenging because we've always learned something, though, with the NBA.
Come up with it then if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but I mean, how many times are we surprised about when we think that, oh, this is impossible. You're not going to be able to do this. You can't do this. And it's like agents get involved, relationships start working out. Like, think about even some of the free agent deals. You're like, why would you do that? Like, who are you competing against with that kind of number? And you're like, oh, well, they wanted maybe something down the road. So that's why I wonder.
Siakam? Siakam is the other one I guess we should mention.
Because I'm sure there's still some teams that still think Simmons is awesome. I'm serious. Like,
he's actually the perfect kind of guy to trade for as long as you're really not risking something, right? Like if you're Sacramento, I would do it because it's like Simmons, you and I both thought he was top 20 heading into last season. And we both think he's, if not the best offensive player in the league, in the top 2 or 3. And you could argue new scene, new city, new motivation, gets away from Embiid. Like there's some upside there.
There's a version. If you have shooting, you letting him run the show. That's why there's also an anti-Portland argument that it's like, is Lillard really going to want to play off the ball that much with him? And he does a little bit with McCollum, but you have to have a situation where Ben's not off the ball. So you'd have to spread it out. I mean, honestly, the best fit for him would be a non-Draymond Golden State, which is, I think, from what I've heard, what Simmons wants. Not like Ben Simmons wants to be in LA. It's not happening. The Lakers' to-do list has been completed. The Clippers are going to just try to figure this out.
He's not old enough for the Lakers.
Yeah,
he's 10 years too young.
And you can't get in the way of Melo's minutes.
When is Ray Allen coming back? Could Ray Allen come back on the Lakers? I'm waiting on it. I guess now not with Rondo, maybe not.
I would say fitness-wise, Ray's probably... Well, it's obviously not happening, but I can't imagine that guy ever having like more than 7% body fat. So
yeah, I agree.
The Golden State part of it, I would think there's interest, but the price that we've all seen floated out there is pretty much what Daryl asked for. It's an insane price, and you're like, all right. And then in a playoff game, I don't like the idea of Draymond and Simmons being on the floor together at the same time.
It's ludicrous.
I just think that part of it's ridiculous. But it kind of gets back to the 4-year thing. Where you're like, so wait, you're going to hold out. You don't want to be here, and maybe you're justified in all of this. But then you're going to tell us where you won't go? Like, we can't trade. Like, you don't want to go to Minnesota, even if Minnesota were to step up and offer whatever package it is.
Did he do that, though?
What's that?
Did he tell them there were teams he didn't want to go to? I never knew what to believe with that. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Clutch, but I didn't know that there was like a do not trade list.
I don't even know, like, does it matter if there is one?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's the other team where I think, like, if you're Sacramento and you go, hey, we miss out on the playoffs every single year, we're stale. Let's throw in Halliburton. You know, like, I could see it maybe getting to something like that.
Well, and they're Sacramento.
Well, they did include a pick in the Tristan Thompson deal, which I still didn't quite figure out.
I'm always ready for anything with Sacramento. If you're Sacramento, I think you could talk yourself into it because you just like selling really high on Halliburton. Halliburton was good last year. I think we both really like him, but it wasn't like he was, you know, I'll be telling my grandkids about his rookie season. He was good. He got hurt. He was fine. I really like him. I love him as an asset. But, you know, for somebody who was a top 20 guy a year ago, if those are the two things, they're ready to trade Buddy Hield for what? Kuzma and Caldwell Pope? It's not like he's a major asset. And then if you're the Sixers, could you compete in the East next year if you turn Ben Simmons into Halliburton and Hield? I think you'd have a better chance than having the drama that Simmons is going to bring. The Simmons thing, do you think there's any chance he just goes back to Philly and it's like, oh man, remember how crazy that was? Now everything's great. I don't see it. I don't think there's any chance that happens.
I would not ever put that at 0. I mean, as likely as that seems right now, but you know what I wouldn't do if I were running?
Percentages? 4%?
What I wouldn't be doing if I were running the Sixers is go, okay, I have no trade I want to do. Like, there's nothing that's even close.
Yeah.
And they're saying they want to hold out in August, now September. All right, we'll see. But hey, the city's mean. It's a mean city, and the city's going to be mean to them. So I can't have them. I don't care. It's what was it nice before this? Like, that's just the deal. That's what you sign up for in Philadelphia. So I wouldn't let the meanness, I would try to not let the noise of the situation impact the decision. And I think Daryl, for the most part, is immune to that stuff. But it's also something that you could then go back to if the trade isn't that great and you're like, oh man, this market stinks. Like this didn't work out. I don't mean to say the Philly market stinks. This trade stinks. And now I can say, hey, we couldn't bring him back to this market, so I need more sympathy on a trade that on paper doesn't look like it was that great. But
well, you also have with Simmons, a good thing to always ask about people in your life, people you work for, whatever. Just at some point, you just gotta strip everything. You go, what are their wins? Like, what are their wins? What were so and so's wins at whatever place you work at? With Simmons, it's like, what are your wins when the game or the series actually mattered? Did you have a moment? Is there something I can point to? And there just isn't. He in every postseason, he was okay. He kind of disappeared in the last 6 minutes. And it's like, at some point, you kind of are who you are. And he's in his mid-20s now, and that's the piece. And Jackie would come on my pod and talk about, like, she really felt like he was afraid to fail. Like, he could make these shots. He was just afraid to fail. And it's like, that is in a weird way a skill, not being afraid to fail, especially when you're an athlete. Like, take Wiggins. Wiggins is frustrating as hell, right? We saw him in those playing games. He had some heat check moments in that last Memphis game, right? Where it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you shooting that? But at least he wasn't scared. It's frustrating that he took some bad shots, but at least he wanted to be out there. At least he was playing hard. At least he was trying to do shit. Whereas I feel like Simmons would have just avoided it for the fourth quarter. And until he shows differently, I think that's how we have to judge him.